Welcome back to another episode of Life Chronicles and Deep Dives podcast. I'm here with Coach Cornelia, all the way in Romania.
Hello, everybody.
And my name is Coach Mika Ranjit. Today, on this episode, we are going to be talking about narcissism. So, I have another video on my personal channel which covers understanding narcissism, which goes into great depth. But today, me and Cornelia are going to have a conversation about it, and we're going to be talking about our experiences. But first, we should probably talk about what it is.
Yeah.
So, narcissistic abuse refers to harmful, emotionally and psychologically abusive behaviors that are inflicted upon a victim, right? This includes manipulation, psychological control. Sometimes it includes physical and sexual abuse, but also it's exploitation of emotions, and it's constant throughout the relationship, right? From the very beginning. We're going to break it down. I've got here the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, and it basically breaks it down into 9 different criteria. And to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, a person has to have 5 of 9 of these criteria. Now, anything that we say in this podcast is not to be used to diagnose or treat anybody, but it is just so you have information. Okay. In the DSM-5, narcissistic personality disorder is defined as comprising a pervasive pattern of grandiosity and fantasy or behavior, a constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy, right? So like these things show up in early childhood and they present as these 9 criteria. All right. A grandiose sense of self-importance. A preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited power, success, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. A belief that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other high status people or institutions. A need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, interpersonally exploitative behavior, a lack of empathy, envy of others, or a belief that others are envious of them, and a demonstration of arrogant and haughty behaviors and attitudes.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it is said that some of these, like a person that is diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, lives in somewhat of a delusional world, right?
Yeah.
So they have a pervasive pattern of grandiosity and fantasy, right? So it's called magical thinking.
Are the narcissists born like that? Can they change or whatever?
Okay, so from my understanding is that there is usually a nexus point, we'll call it a trauma point for the sake of this conversation, right? So there's a trauma point in the childhood's life. Now, that child has a choice of being strong, staying within themselves and moving through it and working towards healing, or adopting what they call a false persona or a mask. And usually when the person that has received that trauma point adopts the false persona and then mask, and they keep it, and then they start believing in it, that is when you start to see narcissism show up. That's my understanding of it.
That's how it starts, right?
So they get this nexus point, they adopt this false mask, they stay with that false mask, and what happens is that mask just changes and evolves, and they wear different ones throughout their life because they don't really get involved with the trauma, right? They stay away from that. Anything negative, they stay away from it. Usually they're projecting it onto somebody else.
Yeah. So, and if, let's say, someone goes and gets diagnosed with narcissism, can they change? Is that, I mean, for let's say someone who loves their partner, but the partner is a narcissist, can the narcissist change?
Okay, so that is kind of it depends on the individual, right? So from my understanding, through like I did 3 years of research into narcissism and studied it for a while, right? So it would take a full-on narcissistic collapse, so usually another nexus point of trauma for the narcissist in order to face their childhood trauma. But not only, since they've been wearing this mask throughout their life, they have to face all of the negative things that they have done throughout their entire life and accept them as, like, I did all these bad things. I did all these bad things. And then they can make the change. So they have to take accountability before they
Yeah.
can move on, right? And that's the hard part.
Yeah. So, I've seen your first episode of the series with narcissism, and I wanted to ask you, for a regular person, how do you spot a narcissist? What red flags you should look after?
Right. So this is the hard one, right? Because unless you've experienced it, you're looking from the outside. The narcissist is wearing a mask with interacting with you. So they're playing nice with you, right? All
Yeah.
the while they're smearing somebody else's name, to you, right? That is a general indicator. If they're behind somebody's back or they're sitting there feigning concern about this individual, and they're not actually concerned, but they're trying to set up a smear campaign on this individual, right? You'll see a lack of empathy. Let's say you go out with friends, and one of your friends, is in a relationship, but is out flirting with other people, right? That could be an indicator. Now, when I look at behaviors, I want to look at a multitude of behaviors, and build up what I would call like an indicator list. So just like the 5 of the 9 criteria that a psychologist was used to diagnose a narcissist, I would look for more of those indicators when dealing with this person. Are they saying something and behaving different? Are they saying something to me, but then they said something to somebody else that's completely opposite, right? Are they in out of relationships, on a very high turnaround rate? Are they consistently cheating on partners, right? It depends on if they're overt. If they're overt, they may just be out there like picking up different partners. If they're covert, they may be like, well, this relationship didn't work out. It's the other person's fault, and every time it's the other person's fault. So when you start checking off check boxes, and usually I'm able to like look at it, and I don't diagnose, but I'm usually able to like identify it for myself through identifying behaviors, right? And that's just some of that.
Yeah. Let's say someone meets a person who is a narcissist. What stages do they go through? I've seen in your video that it's the love bomb, and what are the stages that a narcissist takes you through so you
Right.
can
So
fall in love with them?
right. Yeah, that's usually so like even if they're your friends, they'll go through this stage, right? It's an inevitable cycle. Doesn't
Oh,
matter who they are, right?
yeah.
So it just if it's a friend, it may take longer, right? So the first part is called love bomb. That's where they shower you with gifts, attention, affection. They're overly sexual with you, right? They're like showing up at your house. They're bringing you all these gifts, right? And the difference between like somebody who cares about you or something is that the narcissist will go overboard with it, right? So they'll try to inspire like this twin flame, this like soulmate, reaction within you, right? But also then they try to get you hooked, right? So what they're doing is we'll talk about trauma bonds, sort of in the next part of the cycle, but what they're doing is they're building like a falling off point. So during love bomb phase, you're going up. You're constantly going up, going up, going up. And that's a biochemical reaction in the brain. So you're getting like oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine, right? And you're getting all these feel-good chemicals, right? Well, then once they've got you hooked, you hit devalue stage. So you go from love bomb to devalue. Devalue is the drop off. So you went up, and then right, inexplicably you get dropped back down right here, right? But then because you've been hitting that biochemical reaction high, you want to get back up here. So what do? Change your behavior, right? Devaluing is, criticism. It's like, constant nitpicking, like ignoring you, silent treatments, like a complete opposite change in behavior of what they were doing before, right? You'll see gaslighting, right? Blame shifting, constant criticism, like I said. When this happens, the victim has no idea what's going on, right? They're completely mind blown. They're like, where's this person that I used to love? Now, once they've dropped you down, then they bring you back up, but not up here, right? So they bring you just a little bit up, right? And that is what builds the trauma bond. So the trauma bond is alternating positive and negative reinforcement. What happens is that you get hooked on the high on the way up. They drop you down. You want to get back up there. So then they give you a little bit of that, and then they drop you back down. And what that does is that creates an addiction to the person, right? So your body's reacting to them, right? And that is where they're getting what's called narcissistic supply. And I probably should have mentioned this in the love bomb phase, but the entire goal of a narcissist is to control the outcome of the relationship, control the person, and gain narcissistic supply, which is, attention, admiration. It could be negative. It could be, animosity. Whatever it is, they want it. It's life force for them.
What I wanted to ask you is, are they aware of what they're doing, or it's just an instinct for
Right.
them?
So it's both, actually. Right. So let's continue on with the cycles of abuse. Right. So you're in devalue, like they may isolate you. They're triangulating you with other people. Like, it's basically where they try to either by proxy or that physically bring somebody else into the equation, and you're fighting for the attention, right? That's triangulation. Once they've got you to a point where they know you've got you hooked, they've taken you on this roller coaster, right? Biochemical reaction, trauma bond, and you are dead set hooked. You'll do anything. You're walking on eggshells. You're starting to lose your self-esteem. You lose your confidence. That's when they initiate what's called, discard, right? So discard is when they will completely shut you out, right? They will completely cut you off of all emotional, physical, and intimate connection, right? Once that happens, the victim usually wants that connection back. They want that first person, right? But they don't know what's happening. Now, you just asked me if it's intentional or if it's protective, like a instinct. It's actually both. So the intentional part is you remember how I said they want to control the outcome of the relationship, right? They want to get that discard first before you get to it, right? So they depending on how old they are, they usually will know how to guide the relationship to this point, right? So they, in the beginning, they're learning about you so they can use that to break you down in the end, right? So they're building you up just to break you down. That is intentional. right?
Cool. Very
The
cruel.
yes, right. And the next part is the instinctual protection, right? So narcissism, well, it's named after Narcissus, right? But they're actually defensive mechanisms. So now let's go back to the beginning of this when I talked about the um, trauma nexus, right, where the child had a choice to heal and work through the problem
Yeah.
or adopt a false persona, right? So by adopting that false persona, they haven't dealt with the trauma nexus point, right? So they are protecting themselves from dealing with that negativity. So anything that they do, they're interacting with through the false self, through the mask, in order to protect themselves from harm, right? That doesn't mean that's a good thing, right? It's just not okay to go around abusing people. So like gaslighting, you say, "Hey, I didn't do that," uh, and they're like, "Yeah, you did," right? So that's gaslight, especially if you know that you didn't do it, right? Gaslighting is like denying a reality or trying to manipulate somebody's perception of reality in order to gain control, right? So they are going to do this to protect themselves, right? But also projection. How do they do that? Well, they will project all of their negativity and faults onto the victim. So that way they themselves don't have to hold on to them. So in some ways, yes, it is intentional. And in other ways, it's instinctual defense mechanisms.
Okay. Let's say we meet someone like I've met narcissists, you as well. You have a program called Narcissistic Abuse Recovery. What, let's take your coach hat off, and just as a friend, what would you tell someone who is in such a relationship?
Okay, so I would need to identify the behaviors first. So if somebody comes to me, and people have come to me, right? And some people I've actually reached out to that are really close friends of mine that were going through something, and I was like, "Hey, man, these are indicators, right?" But
Mm.
what do I tell them? Well, I tell them all of the indicators. I try to show them proof, show them the truth, show them how it works. I give them, words and definitions, or not. I don't give them the definitions. I give them words and I have them go like look it up. I mean, and this takes a willing participant, right? So
Sure.
somebody that wants help, right? So I give them, like definitions to look up. I'll send them on like, a YouTube rabbit hole with, like a chain of different videos to like go look at, right? We'll talk, right? We'll talk about experiences. We'll talk about this. And through my narcissistic abuse recovery program, right? Um, Basically, what it is it's understanding, right? So the first phase is, understanding what somebody's going through. And so we'll work through an education period, right? And then like how to move out of survival mode into recovery. Okay. The next part is going to be combining that with boundaries. So you're adding understanding, moving from survival mode to healing, and adding boundaries. Now, those boundaries will protect, they're supposed to protect you, right? Boundaries are not for other people, they're for you to identify with. And then we'll work on protecting yourself from predators through this, a little bit more education, identifying, manipulative behavior.
Yeah.
I will teach you how to identify manipulative behavior. I also teach you counter manipulation tactics, right? Um, Tactics that I thought were useful. My last offering, right, includes all of that. So understanding what you went through, how to move forward from survival mode, right, adding boundaries, protecting yourself from manipulators, and then how to thrive after abuse, right? So like that's the final stage, is like how to do it. I can show you the door, but like I can't, make you walk through the door. So it's all about, and one of my taglines is educate, empower, and elevate, right? So I'm going to educate you, I'm going to empower you to make different choices. And that's not to say that the victim did anything wrong. Empower them to make choices that are better for them, right? And then elevate them, lift them up, help them thrive.
Do you work only with people who finished the relationship with a narcissist, or also with the ones that are still in a relationship with a narcissist?
Let me be clear with what I can't do, right? So I can't focus on trauma and I can't really go into the past. I'm not a licensed therapist, right? What I do have is a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, right, of my own that I can help you with here and now, right? So if you come to me with a problem and you're in a relationship, right, I don't want to tell you what to do, but I will observe, I will give you the tools that, not you specifically, the person, I will give them the tools to make choices on their own, right? And that's key, right? Because I don't want to be responsible for let's say if I give somebody advice and I say, hey, do this, right? And they do it and it goes wrong, right? That is right. But if I give them the education, right, and they go down their own educational path, right, and they start making these choices and we start looking at them and I'm reinforcing positive behaviors while discouraging negative behaviors within the victim in order to help them move forward.
Right. Do you think it's possible for two narcissists to meet in the same relationship?
That is a total possibility, right? So yes, a narcissist can get into a relationship with another narcissist, right? And then it will all be about power dynamics. Who's going to win? And I wouldn't know who's going to win. And that's how they're looking at it. Who's going to win, right? Because remember, they're both going to have the same goal.
Yeah.
Control the victim, control the outcome of the relationship, and narcissistic supply. So they're both going to be either feeding each other. Now, I have read articles about and seen videos about two narcissists that have gotten into a relationship, and because they feed off of each other, they survive, right? And what you'll typically see when that happens, and these are rare, is a full-on narcissistic family cult, right? So not only is mom narcissistic, dad's narcissistic, and remember, this is generational trauma that's being passed down, right? Kids will be narcissistic too, right? And so you've got a whole cult of them all feeding and playing power dynamics, and they will play games with each other. But if you would try to attack the family, they will close up and all come after you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yes, they can survive together. They can create children together, and sometimes they do.
Yeah. How did you get into this narcissistic abuse recovery program that you've made? Why did you make it?
So I made it because I actually experienced it, right? You remember at the beginning of the podcast, I said that it's hard for somebody from the outside to know what it is if they haven't experienced it. Well, I was unfortunate enough to experience it. Now, that experience actually led to a lot of good things in my life, right? So, it went down, I had a relationship. She tried to destroy my life, but then I grew from it, right? I healed. And that's when I came up with this program because I knew at that point that, I don't know if it's, energy, universe, religious, whatever, fate, whatever it is, right? But I knew at that point that I was in that relationship, in that experience, because now I can help people, right? I experienced that, and because I experienced that, now I can help people, right? And I think that's why I was in that experience to begin with.
It's very interesting that you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, because I'm looking at you. You look like a strong man, inside and outside, right? So still you've been a victim of a narcissist partner. How can this happen?
Okay, so
You mainly think about men being abusive in a relationship, men being narcissists, right? So
right,
you've been a victim of a woman who was a narcissist, right?
correct. So how does that work? All right, well, usually, and this will, and even in my program, right, I actually talk about this as a significant thing, right? So seeking behavior, right, can actually attract narcissists to you, right? But also narcissists can identify people that are highly empathic, that have had trauma, right? Because then they know that they, just like I can identify them now, they can identify me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now they stay away from me, but how did it happen? I was seeking a relationship, right? So I had actually just gotten out of a previous relationship, and had been cheated on, and there were some indicators there that that relationship also had, indicators that it was narcissistic, but I didn't know it at the time, right? I didn't do the time and didn't do the research, right? I just moved on with my life. And I was seeking a new relationship. Well, seeking that new relationship, I was open, I was honest, I was vulnerable, and I gave them, this individual, everything that she needed to come into my life, take me through love bomb, then take me through devalue, and then cheat on me. I think I figured out that she had cheated on me before she got a chance to discard me before the holidays. But it was still a discard because I was like, hey, let's work through this. Let's try to figure this out right after she cheated on me, right? So trauma bonded. I'm like trying to figure out this thing. And I'm like, you know, she was, the mask was somebody that was vulnerable, that was humble, right?
Yeah.
Now, when I was talking about the 5 of 9 characteristics to be categorized or to be diagnosed as narcissistic personality disorder, I didn't also talk about that the DSM-5 doesn't make a distinction between overt narcissists and covert narcissists.
Right. Yeah.
So I actually, my dating, I was dating a covert narcissist. So overt's more grandiose, charming, extroverted. They can appear confident. They're still looking for supply, um, but they're loud and boisterous, right? Confident even. A covert narcissist is going to be the vulnerable, the humble, the sweet, sometimes helpful individual that is nice to everybody else and nice to you at first, but then once they get you hooked, then they start treating you like less and less and less. And that was just my experience.
Right. So you said that you didn't know anything about narcissism back then. So
No,
she showered you with love and everything else from the love bomb stage, right? And then
right.
what happened? What was
Well,
what
the
exactly?
so this relationship went from love bomb, which was a mask, right? She was
Yeah.
fun. We were going out. We are doing all these things, right? She was inviting me places. I was, integrating with family, right? Everything that I wanted in a relationship, she wore that mask and brought to the relationship, right? What happened after that? She started to pull away. She withdrew herself for no reason, right? And I never really looked through her phone. I never looked at her computer. I never did anything to pry into anything. But she was clearly engaged elsewhere during, the last portion of the relationship before I figured out she cheated on me. She must have been having secret conversations to set up, hanging out with people that I didn't know about. There were just some indicators that I was blind to by the trauma bond, right? So went from love bomb, hit the D value. She started changing. I was walking on eggshells. I was trying to fix things. She even attempted what we call a soft discard. This is a test to see if you'll stick around.
Oh,
She presented herself as like, hey, this relationship might not be working out, blah, 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 right? And then here I am trying to fix it, right? And
Yeah.
that's, the trap.
What were your feelings in those moments when you started? You said that you're going up, 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 and then you go down. What does a person feel about this
Okay,
part?
so when you're on the uphill, right? So you're happy, you're good, you're elated, right? It's almost euphoric when dealing
Mm-hmm.
with a narcissist, right? So it's like overly happy and like, they're intimate with you, but they're using that as a weapon, right?
Right.
So you're way up there, right?
Mm.
When they withdraw, right? When they, like you've been interacting with them, like every morning you get a good morning text or you send a good morning text, and then all of a sudden there's none for 2 days. That and no communication, that and is where the drop off comes, right? So it also plays into like different like attachment styles, right? But also when I was younger, way younger, right? So, and she knew this. She knew everything because I told her, right? So when I was born, I was left on the doorstep of an adoption clinic in India, right? I didn't have parents, right? And my mom was nice enough, or somebody was nice enough to at least leave me on the doorstep of an adoption clinic, right? And then I was adopted into the United States, right? Because of that, I have that abandonment trauma that I needed to work through.
Yeah.
She was able to use that to her advantage to get me to work harder, to get me to stay, to get me to change, to get me to do whatever she wanted. She was using that. She also knew that betrayal trauma was one of the worst things that she could do to me because I told her on our first date that I had just been cheated on. And, that was devastating to me, right?
Yeah.
Our first date, I told this individual that. And that's exactly what she did. And she went down there, which she went down 2 hours south of where I live to do this. She knew what she was doing because she told me the next day, hey, look, I know that was the worst thing I could have done to you, right? Well, if you knew, you could have called, broke up with me, you could have not done it at all. You know what I mean? Right. But then she somehow managed to turn herself into the victim. Right. So all of a sudden, through the smear campaign, I became the abuser. I became controlling. I became, whatever. But I didn't realize that I was hooked to the trauma bond. Right. I was trying to get back up.
Yeah.
But I was also trying to figure out like, so for some reason, the gaslighting wasn't working with me. Right. She was trying to like change my reality, tell me I was doing things, telling me I was, um, telling me I was a narcissist. She was like trying to project all of these things onto me, told me I wasn't taking personal responsibility, all of these things, right? And through that, plus the smear campaign, to her friends, I probably didn't look the greatest, but I was emotionally devastated. I was trying to get answers from the person in the beginning of the relationship that didn't
Mhm.
actually exist, right?
Yeah.
The person that would have answered those questions, the person that pretends that they're that person, with everybody else, right? So it was quite interesting to go through that, but I'm glad that I made it out. It just shows that humans are resilient.
Oh yes. Yes, there. So I was asking before, my last question was, what were your feelings about it? Like, when you have to do with a narcissist, it comes a time when you know that you have to break up with that person, or you have to finish the relation, otherwise you're gonna be finished, right? But at the same time, you love that person. So it's a very hard, I find it a very, very hard choice in between these two things. Constantly trying to believe that maybe they will change, maybe if you change, you will produce a change, and so on.
So
How
yeah,
was it for you?
definitely. So like feelings, right? So like I hoped that she would change. I hoped that she would go back to who she said she was at the beginning, right? That's all it was, is I was holding on to hope that she would change, right? I loved this individual. I loved the mask. So basically, when they put on the mask, they mirror everything good about you back to
Oh
you,
yeah.
right? So me, I was in love with this individual, right? But I was actually in love with the best aspects of myself within that she was mirroring back.
Yeah.
That was the most devastating part because, like, you're also betrayed, right? So I was betrayed, but you're betrayed by the mask because it's not a person that exists, right? Once you realize that that person no longer exists, the whole relationship from the beginning, remember, it's all a scam. Like, it takes some people years to like heal from that kind of trauma. But the thing is that, remember, we talked about that pain trauma nexus point from being in childhood, right? Now, a narcissist puts the mask on and adopts the false persona. Now, the empath, and that's not like a clinical term, but like the empath, or somebody that like has like deep feelings and is actually everything that the narcissist wants to be, works through that trauma nexus point to heal. That is what saved me, is the fact that I've been through several traumas through life, right? But I've faced them. I spend a lot of time introspecting, and I'm working on myself, self-improvement. I try to make amends where, if I do something to hurt somebody, um, I'm usually the first person to run out there and try to fix it, right? But because I was able to work through all of my trauma in my younger years and growing up, I've witnessed a suicide even, and working through that trauma, right? I was able to have resilience
Yeah.
to the betrayal, to, I didn't just take on her, I was getting abused by her whole family at the same time, right? So I took on a narcissistic family cult and flying monkeys all at the same time.
So you said that she and her family, they were abusing you somehow, right? They were narcissists. What happened? How did you break up, and what happened after the breakup?
Right. So, well, actually, I called her out for cheating. I figured out she started showing me indicators of betrayal and deception. And so, and up until then, I had been kind of like blind, but that was one thing, right? Because I, just assumed that she was just a different person from the last person, right? But one thing that I could recognize is deception and betrayal, right? Um, so that's how the breakup happened. I called her out, and then, she said she wanted to wait a few days and think about, fixing it and working on it. But in reality, she was just off with friends and trying to go back and see the other guy. Oh, well, I'm waiting for closure, right? So that's kind of what happened. And then we officially broke up. And then I just really couldn't figure it out. Like, why did this happen? Where did this person go that I initially was dating, right? For
Yeah.
months, right? And, like, I tried to talk to, like, I was like, hey, look, what's happening? Does this, have to do with something that she experienced before? Like, and she'd show up, or like, pop in when she needed something, or when she wanted supply, we would interact. We'd stay in communication after that breakup, right? So remember, the abuse cycle goes through different phases, and part of that is after the discard, they want you to stay right where you're at, broken, traumatized, so they can come to you. In basically, what they do is, after they discard you, they shelve you, right? Then they hoover you back into the relationship. They'll show up when they need something: attention, affection, right? Money, whatever, a place to stay. Um, they will show back up, usually to come get that, right? So after the breakup, like, I left that door open for her to come back, but also I was initiating with her and she was receptive. So I was trying to get the relationship back and change and build myself up and, like, do all these awesome things and try to re-attract her,
Mm.
because the way she made me feel is like I wasn't doing anything to attract her, right? But in reality, she was abusing me the whole time, and I from day one and didn't know it, right? So that's kind of what happened after the breakup. Her family also. We had whole conversations where it was just like her family and me about our breakup, and I'm like, now I'm looking at it, I'm like, that's kind of weird, right? They will say it was to protect her from me, but I'm like sitting here and I'm just like, why are they trying to explain to me my breakup and she's just sitting there watching the whole thing play out? Well, they were manipulating my emotions and abusing me and withholding and manipulating basically.
Yeah.
And she was just watching like a sideliner, like
So
a
talk
person
more.
watching a game.
Yeah. Are the narcissists feeding with your emotions?
Yeah.
It's a boiling point when you just have enough and just explode, and then they sit calmly and say you're crazy, and they
Yes.
seem to feed with that energy that you have in that moment,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, it makes them happy when they can get emotional reactions. So again, like that's that supply that they're looking for, the control of your emotions, right? So if you're reacting emotionally to a narcissist, they will use that as supply that will
Yeah.
feed them,
Yeah, they seem to calm down in that moment for a while. They
right?
feel, yeah, yeah. So they're not
And
that angry anymore, hungry anymore.
yeah, I mean, and that's because they're trying to play the victim, right? So they want you to look bad, right? And that's what happened, right? So after the breakup, the smear campaign happened, and I was still trying to get answers, still trying to, and she talked to me different in person, but then when we'd be out or she'd be out and we'd interact in places, she would act completely different than, like whatever, right? She'd talk to me nice in person, but then out in public, she would act like I didn't exist or that I was a problem.
Do you want
So
like to share what exactly she's done after you break up?
yeah, yeah. So she attempted to destroy my life. So because of those defense mechanisms that we talked about earlier, right? She went on full scale attack. My now fiance, this was a year later, 2 years after the breakup, right? And I had went around and I'd like try to tell people about the abuse, and they never believed me up until this point because the smear campaign, right? I was the abuser to them. Now, 2 years later, I'm like in a relationship with somebody, and my fiance now gets hired on at a gym. My ex girlfriend gets hired on at the same gym. And she tried multiple times, right? Provoking reactions to try to get me kicked out. I never really did anything to her. I was, taking my fiance to work because we were on opposite shifts. I was going there doing open gyms with her, right?
Mhm.
I even helped set up the gym a little bit and do some, like minor, interior renovation on the place, right? Um, I I would, like and there was something that happened in town. I had to escort parents and their kids to their car, right? Like I was doing good things, right? And it seemed like there wasn't a problem until there was. Um, she tried to get me removed, and she had convinced several people that I was bad, right? So one person actively tried to get me removed, but then other people let me back in, probably because they didn't want to lose my fiance from the place.
Yeah.
Then I had seen her one day, and I looked at her, and told my fiance, I was like, man, she's gonna fire off a protection order. And 3 days later, and we saw on my cameras that the cop was like outside my door and trying to serve me with this protection order. And I was just like, I wasn't home at the time, but I was also like looking, and I'm just like, why? Why? I've been ignoring her. I've been staying away from her. I haven't talked to her. I haven't done anything to her, right? Well, because I know what she is, right? Because I can see through the mask, right? Because I'm also ignoring her, and because she can't get me kicked out, she had to do everything. Now, she submitted 77 plus pages and exhibits and had statements from her mom, her stepdad, friends, people that I didn't even recognize, somebody that I knew from a long time ago that she lied to. She had
So
one of her friends that's a life coach even lie in
this
court or to the judge.
this happens after 2 years
Yes.
after. Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So like absolutely like full bore, right? And what it is as you break free, as you heal, as you move on, they don't want that, right? They
mm,
also don't want to see you doing better. So they have to destroy whatever you have good going on. I was trying to buy a house. I was launching, my life coaching and narc abuse recovery program and all of that. And she wanted to destroy that plus my relationship. But now to get the protection order, because I wasn't home to get it, right? She actually called my work and said I was, and I work on a military installation. She actually called my work and said I was sneaking weapons onto the base. And I was
that's
detained at gunpoint. Yeah, for that. I was almost shot uh, because one of the guys aimed his weapon at me, but also was aiming it at another police officer. So through, like if he would have, it was bad. It was a bad. It would have been bad. But because the one officer was flagging me forward while the other one was telling me to stop at the same time. Anyway, after an interview and realizing that she had manipulated somebody else to say that I was bringing guns onto base, and she also said that, or something along those lines, that I went and picked up the protection order myself. They actually let me go, and I just went and picked it up myself. So I actually went to the place, and the guy's like, "You're served," right? So I got it. I had to get a lawyer, and we went to court. And I just brought forth facts and evidence. So in 77 pages plus exhibits, I think it was, or some odd a number than that, she detailed our entire relationship and pretty much twisted every situation to make me look like the bad guy. So, I mean, every situation was me doing this, me, it's my fault. I was the abuser. I did something bad, right? And it like every situation through the entire relationship.
what she's done. She said you are doing right.
Yes, that is also correct. She did a lot of projection in there. She did a lot of playing the victim, right? But I saved all of my messages, right? I saved pictures. I saved a letter that she had wrote. I had, pictures, and I was able to bring forth facts and evidence, and the judge dismissed the petition for the protection order on no evidence. There was no evidence, right? But not only that, he dismissed it because she lacked credibility. Several of the things with evidence that I brought basically showed that she was lying to the court, and she had her friends lie to the court. One of them is even another life coach, and like I feel bad for this person because my ex goes to her every time she gets a breakup. So she goes to this friend that she has in the harem that she has shelved just to get attention and admiration and pity party whenever she gets broken up with, right? And this other life coach who's never been in the business told the judge I was, stalking my ex at the business, when in reality, if she had been in there, she would know that I was with my fiance.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, whatever, like she's being lied to. The thing is that I know, you remember, after a while, those everybody goes through that cycle. Everyone's going to go through the love bomb, devalued, discard. Everyone's going to be idealized and then
Mm,
devalued and
yeah.
then discarded, right? Just a matter of time. And if as long as I've told people the truth, some people believe me, some people don't believe me. I've accepted the fact that, we talked about this last time. Like I had to accept the fact that
Yeah.
even though people don't believe me. I've told them the truth. They can do with that what they want. Now, that's me healing, right? I also did a lot of introspection. I did a lot of personal work. I made amends. Even me trying to make amends, she was able to use that and weaponize it against me. But a lot of healing, a lot of introspection. I learned a lot about myself, right? Made some changes in my behavior patterns as well.
Right. Yeah. That's also important.
Absolutely.
You keep meeting narcissists, or you go through the same situation over and over again until you get to change yourself a little bit and find some boundaries and some limits, like I said.
Right. Absolutely.
So not from a point of a life coach, but from the point of a person who's been through a narcissistic relationship, what would you advise anyone who's in a situation like yours right now?
Well, see, that is a very good question. It's a tough one because for them, if they want to get out, it's going to be hard, right? You have to break the trauma bond. You have to initiate no contact. There is an education phase. You're going to have to do a lot of internal work. Um, so, what would I tell somebody? Is it's hard work, but it's worth it.
So now that they've seen that you have experience and you have this program, Narcissistic Abuse Recovery, how can they ask for help from you? How
Okay,
long
so
that
there's
lasts?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways, right? So you can reach out to me on my website. We'll link that in the description box below. So I've got a 12 session package up to a 36 session package, right? That they can purchase on my website. And I've got it set to like super cheap. It's $1 a minute, you know.
Yeah.
And then also, I have a series called Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse on my personal coaching YouTube channel. And we will also link that in the description box below. That's a 10-part series. I've only got the first part out now. So if you're interested in a little bit more detail in the narcissistic abuse cycle and my experience, it is in the first video called Understanding Narcissism. That was the 5th episode of Life Chronicles and Deep Dives podcast. And Cornelia did a great job with the interview. And I'm hoping that everybody learned a little bit of something about narcissism. And if you have any questions, don't forget to leave them in the comment box below, and we'll be sure to answer them.